Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Road to Champaign. Here in the TennisONE app, I'm Madison Golden here with TennisONE, and I'm joined today, as always, alongside Mark Bay, our college tennis insider. And we have a lot to unpack this episode. We're talking all things bubble, so we're going to get right into it. And Mark, obviously, a lot to unpack from this last week, even since we last spoke on Wednesday. And I just wanted to know what stood out to you over this past week in these conferences?
I just felt that the idea of being a number one seed wasn't that significant. There were a lot of upsets. There's always something going on tournament time, and it's wonderful when kids at this level, 19, 20-year-olds, put it on the line and the best player wins that day. So the parity has been consistent throughout the season and for sure was evident in the conference tournaments.
Yeah, and definitely. And we're going to walk you through each of these conferences right now. And Mark's going to break it down for us. And we're going to start with the ACC women's tournament that took place. Mark, what can you tell us about the ACC on the women's side?
That's AAC you have there.
Oh, yeah, ACC. Sorry, Jordan. There we go.
Yeah, wonderful. The ACC was won by Duke Blue Devils. Clearly, this is a very strong group. 8 teams here looking to be in the NCAA tournament. UNC still ranked number 1 after taking its second loss. So lost to Duke and then lost to Virginia here in the conference tournament. Duke winning the conference tournament over Virginia, but still Carolina 1, Virginia 4, Duke 5, even NC State 7. So these top 4 are top 10. It's an amazing conference, outstanding year, and Florida State did a great job of beating Notre Dame there in the conference tournament to secure their spot. So all 8 of these are going to be in. That's an incredibly strong group and a wonderful representation for the ACC women.
Yeah, what a strong conference that is. And now taking a look at the men's side of things as well.
Virginia, I think, separated themselves, showed that they were going to be the top dog, held form, did a great job. After an incredibly difficult schedule early on, Coach Pedroso put out there, seemed to get them ready, and they were obviously running the ACC table. North Carolina was the surprise. They were in the low 20s in the rankings and now have put themselves up to number 15 now. So now North Carolina is talking about hosting and trying to battle their way into an Elite Eight. So that's an amazing effort from Coach Tripp and Sam to get the team that was a little bit up and down in the beginning to make such a strong push and make the actual ACC final. So that's an outstanding job there. And you can see a really strong contingent with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 men's teams. So ACC looking at 17 potential teams in the NCAA tournament this year through men and women. That's an amazing year.
Yeah, what a dominant conference that is. So now moving over to another Power Five conference, the SEC, starting with the women's side of things.
I mentioned it briefly before when I was at National Indoors that Coach Weaver told me that he thought his team was good. He said, Mark, I don't know how good we are, but I feel like we're really good. And I must say, he was spot on. Texas A&M ladies run the table, run the league. We talked about how there were 17 straight matches going into the conference tournament, and they get the job done. And I really feel like their seeding is 6 because of possibly a loss to Cal early on, but ultimately very formidable team and going to be, I think, a challenging team going down the stretch. And as you see, these other teams, Georgia, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, they all, South Carolina, Vandy, Arkansas, Alabama. So this is amazing strong. And Alabama's at 40, 41 right now. So they're going to be sort of in the bubble conversation, hoping that some things happen. But SEC women outstanding again.
Yeah, and taking a look at the men's side for SEC, what about the men's side of things, Mark?
Well, I think after Brian Shelton's team lost a couple matches indoors to TCU early on, and then Texas at the national indoors, they've run the table. And Coach Brian said on our broadcast last week, they've gone 3 consecutive years, 36 straight regular season SEC matches, which is just beyond. So, because the likes of Tennessee with Johannes Monday back, Kentucky with the depth with Draxel and Diallo and going all the way down the line. Here, I mean, Kentucky made it to this conference final. They're very good. Tennessee is coming on strong. South Carolina obviously has been good. Took a little bit of a hiccup in the conference tournament, but this is really, really, in my opinion, still representative. Sometimes the SEC can get even more in, but that's, I think, a very strong representation for them as well.
Absolutely. And we did have a question pop up in the chat. Are we going to get a UNC Duke showdown come playoff time?
It's a good question. It's going to depend. UNC Duke, was he referring to men or women? Is he referring to women?
Did not specify, so I would
Yeah, I would
we'll go with
imagine that's.
women.
I'm guessing it's a women's side question. It could happen. It just depends on how the draw spits. Right now, with Duke being a 5 and UNC being a 1, that wouldn't happen unless there was some more upsets and things going on, because they tend to have the draws pretty traditionally symmetrical, meaning one playing 8, one playing 16, two playing 7, and so on. So 1 and 5 wouldn't tend to happen. It could happen, but it would have to be possibly a quarterfinal with 5 beating 4.
All right. Well, possibly we'll see it in the quarterfinal. So now switching gears
Semifinal, actually,
over,
with 5
sorry,
beating 4.
semifinal.
Yeah.
Semifinal, we think. All right. You heard it here first, folks. We see it. Mark Bay said it. So there we go with that. We'll head over to the Big 12 women's side now. Taking a look at this conference.
Oklahoma had been dominating all season long and did a great job from national indoors, backing it up and running through. But Texas is your NCAA defending champion. Coach Joffrey's outstanding. He's got the team pumped up. They took the underdog card and played just lights out in that final. Peyton Stearns actually beat Lane Sleeth 0-0, and Lane Sleeth is very good. So that was a wild. Texas winning the doubles in a very close doubles point, and then having 3 outstanding performances to be able to put Oklahoma down. So Texas now is showing that they are clearly going to make a run to try to repeat, as Florida is, and I think that just adds more excitement to this. And I'm looking forward to it. But great representation, and look at Kansas in there, Iowa State, Texas Tech. These teams are all doing well. The Oklahoma 2, Texas 3, Oklahoma State 9, Kansas 25, Baylor 26, Texas Tech 33. It's a great, great conference.
Like you said, lots of good representation on the women's side, but taking a look at the men's side now for Big 12.
Baylor Bears stepped up. That doubles point was huge. The matches were split 3-3, played on TCU's home turf, and Baylor gets it done. So Baylor ends up winning 2 out of 3, taking Texas down. And Texas is still a little dinged up with the injuries and trying to find their stride. So Texas may be a factor if they can rally the troops. But Baylor and TCU have been the class of the men's side in the Big 12, and they have that decider now. So Baylor is walking into the NCAAs carrying that higher seed now. And at this point, 3 in the nation, with TCU still 1, carrying such strong wins in the early part of the season and playing such a strong schedule. You're going, well, gosh, TCU's lost to Michigan and lost a bunch. It's the way the algorithm is spun now. So some people don't necessarily feel that TCU has won. I think we're going to have to see it all come out in the wash.
TCU still on top, as you just mentioned, but now looking at the Pac-12 women's side of things, to switch back to the women's side.
And here comes Lily, folks. Tournament time has been Lily time for so many years and for so long. I would have to get a calculator and use more than 2 hands to count how many titles Stanford has won, whether it's men or women, but Lily's been dominating. And so here she comes. The low seed doesn't matter to her. They come through the Pac-12, outstanding. It was a really tight match with UCLA in the semis. They get through that. And then Arizona State had a little bit of a surprise run. It's not that it's a surprise run, because clearly they're a really good team at 17 in the nation, but they got to the final. It was outstanding. Cal had a little bit of a hiccup there. And here comes Stanford Cardinal come tournament time. And I think when that draw spits, there's a lot of people that are not going to want to see Stanford on that line.
Definitely. And switching over to the men's side of the Pac-12.
USC. There's been so much going back and forth with these teams. And currently now this week, USC 13, Stanford 16, Arizona 17. It's been going up and down. Clearly, Arizona's done a nice job earning some street cred this year and having control of the conference for a while and having the higher ranking. But USC has proven that they're ready to go here and make a push. Stanford has been a player short and had some ups and downs a little bit with the lineup, but I think Coach Goldstein is ready to get after it as well. Hopefully, a couple of these teams get to host and have the first two rounds on their home turf so they can try to make the push to make it to Champaign.
Definitely, and we'll finish things off with the AAC for the women and men, starting with the women's side of things.
Yeah, I got a chance to do the color commentary in Tulsa last weekend for the American Conference, which is a strong, deep conference. And unfortunately, SMU and Tulsa are not on this list now because SMU is just inside the cut as a bubble team at 43, but then they lost in the semis. And then obviously Tulsa losing in the finals didn't help themselves point wise. UCF is just a top 20 team all year. They had a kind of a crazy loss to USF in the conference tournament, which was a big surprise and a great job by that team to get it done there, Coach Moros. But in Memphis, with the weather being bad, where it was able to take a little bit more of an advantage of the indoor surroundings there with some great offensive players and win the conference and steal a berth. And that berth that they won ends up taking a spot later on, and we'll see in the show from actually Wisconsin, and put Wisconsin one out now because Memphis was at 57 looking on the outside in, but with the conference title obviously has an automatic berth.
All right, and finishing off with the men's AAC conference.
Grant Chin leaves UCLA, comes over here 4 years in with an All American team. And when's the last time you saw an All American team top 20 in the nation? I can name the big time ones, the Stanford 98, the Illinois 2003, and maybe a couple UCLA teams here and there. But it's really difficult to say there's a lot of 100% American nationally ranked NCAA teams in the top 20. So I want to give a shout out to Grant. That was a big win. They lost a doubles point, went for the hard way, got the job done over Memphis. And USF is just holding on, just inside the bubble right now at 45. So hopefully that conference can get three in and Coach Ashley Fisher can have the boys playing.
Absolutely. Well, we warned you. There was a lot to unpack, and there's still so much more to go. But right now, we would like to welcome in a very special guest, head coach of the men's tennis team at Princeton University. Billy Pate is here with us right now. Coach Pate, thank you so much for joining us here in the TennisONE app. We're so excited to have you.
Madison, Mark, great to see you guys and for everything you're doing for college tennis, and appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to let Mark take over the interview because he knows it best. So go ahead, Mark.
Billy, we go way back, my friend. Way back. I am so happy to have you on tonight and appreciate everything that you've done, even for me back in the National Junior Tennis Conference days where you came and gave lectures. So you've been contributing and wanting to be a part always. And so obviously very happy to see you tonight and be able to talk. So I'm going to start. Obviously, you had some early coaching for 5 years. There wasn't Division I work, and then you had a couple years at Notre Dame, and then 10 years down in Alabama, and now and 10 years at Princeton. Looking at this Notre Dame, Alabama, Princeton piece, can you speak to how hard is it to make the tournament in those different types of scenarios, those types of schools, those types of programs? Granted, I don't think Notre Dame was an ACC program back when you were there, but give me an idea of what making the tournament was like in those three different situations.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. I think times have changed, obviously, with all the conference realignment, and as you alluded to, when I was at Notre Dame, it was 2000 to 2002, working for Coach Bayless, and we were in the Big East then, so it was really a battle between our guys in Miami. Well, it was a pretty fierce rivalry. It's kind of they've continued that in the ACC, ironically, but that was a really fun. And you remember those characters back then. So Coach Bayless would play really a Big Ten schedule, honestly, and you may remember that. So he played pretty much everybody in the Big Ten, being there in South Bend, and that really obviously enhanced his schedule. It was a very very national schedule, so that was sort of the route. Of course, you knew you had a good chance to win the Big East. You were really just battling Miami at that time. With Alabama, I think that nothing's really changed in terms of like being in the SEC, and you put the graphic up there with the SEC and the ACC. It's just so deep. I mean, and I think the bottom line, I think the takeaway is if you're Alabama had a tough year this year, but they were really young and they were talented. They were really close. But if you get just a couple of those wins, quality wins that could get you into the tournament. But it also can go the other way. Like Vanderbilt kind of had a hard luck year too. I thought thought they were very good, and it looks like they may be a little bit outside the bubble. I'm not sure, but I think they're a very good team. So it can work either way. So I think it just depends. And then at Princeton, obviously, and I know we'll talk about this, but the Ivy League's that's getting so strong, and but we really have to be mindful of scheduling aggressively outside of the league. Although it's gotten a lot better. I was talking to Coach Rube at Harvard today, and he said back in the '90s, if they didn't win the league, they might not be getting into the tournament, right? So it's changed a lot in the Ivies, but we still have to be mindful. But the good thing for us is we have 7 matches in the Ivy, so we have an opportunity to be creative with our schedule, whether we want to go to the West Coast, which we typically do for spring break, or we want to go down south, we go to the Blue Gray. We played NC State this year, as you showed on the graph, and then we have played Florida. So we try to have a very diverse schedule in terms of putting ourselves in the best position for a bid.
So how do you feel right now with your team's chances, this whole bubble life that you're living right now? I mean, are you sitting back? Or are you going Pepto-Bismol? Like right now, on a 1 to 10, just where are you? How hard is your heart beating for
Yeah,
Monday?
I'm a little stressed about it. Just I'm a little paranoid. I have a lot of colleagues around the country saying, "Hey, you're in," and a lot of people saying you better wait. And I agree with that. We what's hard as a coach is this, Mark, is you want to control. We always talk about controlling our own destiny. Well, the hay's in the barn at this point, right? So we've got to let other people work for us. Although I don't know that much. Hopefully for us, for our sake, nothing will change this weekend. Obviously, you've got the Big Ten is probably the most prominent conference playing our conference tournament, and ironically, we ended up playing 6 of the Big Ten teams this year. Strangely enough, and of course, Wisconsin and Nebraska have kind of gotten a little bit of a hot streak throughout the last part of the year and have done pretty well. So we'll be rooting for them. But I don't know, and I leave this to my assistant Damian Hume. He's been really looking at the metrics, been following the college tennis ranks algorithm, and really seeing where we are. I think we were ranked 41 today, but we'll be forecasted maybe to be 42 percentage points, maybe just ahead of Texas Tech, which is right there on our heels. And I think Georgia Tech is a hard luck team too. I mean, I feel for Kenny, man. They have an incredible team. Obviously, they proved it by upsetting Wake in the ACC, but I really feel for those guys because they're a quality team. But they had a ton of free losses. But they're sitting there, I think, at 44 in the projected NCAA cut, but unfortunately are under the 500 rule. And then you have, I think, Tulsa, South Florida, Arkansas, kind of right there as well. So it's sort of a lot of good teams, sort of facing down the barrel of the gun, so to speak.
No doubt. Can we put up our strength of schedule graphic again? Speaking about your team, so you get those wins, and obviously you lost to Penn, but you still were able to beat them. They're a really top team. Wisconsin, Nebraska, and so on, and losing to NC State and Florida, and just the strength of schedule that you played on this other side. Do you feel that because you only have 7 Ivy matches and no conference tournament, that you will continue to do this? Coach Laura Granville did a similar thing. She was almost like Pedroso at 1-6 or something at some point and had to run the table in the Ivies just to get to 11-10. I mean, that's a little helter skelter for what you guys are doing. But here you both are almost like bookends at 41 and 42 in the nation. And she's in the tournament by virtue of winning the league. And then hopefully you can possibly get in with some help. So do you think that the way you guys went about it is the way you're going to have to continue to go about it in terms of strength of schedule?
Yeah, I don't plan to change anything in terms of what we're doing. But we do need to be very mindful of scheduling. Every coach should be. I remember I played for Andy Jackson at Mississippi State back in the day. Of course, he's at Arkansas, and he's right there bubble, and obviously a very smart guy. And I remember him always saying, "But recruiting, scheduling is the second most important thing a coach needs to do." So it is really crucial, and you really need to know the numbers today. It really is a strategy. And of course, you're projecting a year or two out when you're making the schedule. It's pretty far out. And we got a little bit of bad luck. I think everybody's had a little bit of bad luck lately with COVID, and then non-COVID illnesses, and then a lot of injuries we've had this year. Honestly, we have not been healthy in one match really. But we showed up at NC State with 3 of our top 6, and then Florida for the kickoff with 3 of our top 6. So that wasn't an ideal recipe to beat those teams. But but we started getting a little healthier and got some good opportunities by playing the blue gray. Playing Matt Hill hosted a great tournament at Arizona State. We were fortunate we beat them in the finals. And I know he had a tough year too because that win would have been even better had they had the year they would have expected. So it's a lot of stuff you can't predict. So and I think what Laura, as you mentioned, Coach Granville's done on our women's side. Obviously the women's side maybe is not quite as deep in the Ivy, and so she felt really compelled to go out and schedule some heavyweights, and she did. And it was tough for them. They had some of the same COVID issues because we were testing 3 times a week, so almost all of our athletes saw a lot of missed time. So that was a little unfortunate early for her, but she did pick it up toward the end, and of course won the league. And I'm glad to see that. But yeah, I think that's going to be a strategy for both the men's side and the women's side here in the Ivy.
Speaking to the regionalization and this new format for the round of 16, then where would a team like yours go? I mean, because they're trying to mix it and balance it. Let's say you were fortunate enough to make the tournament with them trying to limit the amount of flights, what have you. Where do you think you could end up if you were actually selected?
Yeah, I think it's straightforward and not so straightforward. I think Harvard is likely to host, right? They're I think sitting at 14, if I'm not mistaken. They should get a host. So, but of course, no. I don't think conferences can go to another conference host. So that would put us within a radius of Virginia. So I think either us, if we were lucky enough to get in, Penn or Columbia would go to Yay. We did a few years ago, and the women's team did as well. I think Laura, speaking to her today, she thought that could be a likely scenario for them as well. But then that leaves two other Ivy teams with at-large berths that would probably be shipped out somewhere else. And I think at that point, Mark, and I don't know exactly what the NCAA committee will do. I think in the past, once they get past that driving radius, I think you can really go anywhere. We could end up on the West Coast. We could end up in Texas. We could end up in the SEC. And in the Midwest. So a lot of variety of places. And of course, when you're an at large, and especially if you're sort of on the bubble, and if you get in, you're happy to go anywhere. So we're happy. We think we can be dangerous against just about any team. We'll get a little healthier, and but we'll go wherever they send us. We'll be delighted just to be in.
Outstanding. So, in terms of Princeton, one of the most difficult educations in the country, coming down the stretch here, it's finals time. Academics, I've seen students leaving the NCAA courts and rushing to the hotels to take tests and quizzes. Where is Princeton in the academic year, and how is that going to affect your team trying to win the first round?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Mark. We just changed our academic calendar for the better. But I don't know if you knew this. We weren't playing the kickoff because we would take final exams after Christmas from the fall, which was crazy. But that means we would finish much later. So we impact. Like I had a couple of guys in Lake Nona 2 years ago, I believe, that were playing in the doubles and taking their final exams on the day they played. Of course, that's the individual part of the tournament. But now it is because we have a new calendar and we're taking exams earlier. We will have some guys possibly taking exams during the regionals, or maybe the day after, day before, depending on how it lines up. So it is a challenge. There is a policy at most Ivy institutions that you take the final exam the day it's offered. I remember even as a player at Mississippi State being at Georgia, and Harvard was there, and all the players had a proctor there, and they were taking exams at the Holiday Inn there and off Broad Street in Athens. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So, to kind of sum it up here, the last question I have for you is, which match are you guys going to be focused on? Is there a particular match that has this indirect, direct flipping that Princeton is now caught in that weave? So where are you focusing your sights this weekend in terms of watching a result and keeping up with the ticker?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good one. I go back to I wish we could control our own destiny. We beat Cornell last Friday, and then we ended up at Columbia on Sunday in a barn burner, which we seem to have with them a lot. And we actually it was 3-all, and it came down to number 6. In fact, your Midwest guy Bill Dua was up 3-0 in the third, had some chances. We ended up losing the third, so we were looking at that one to secure our spot. And we knew if we didn't, we'd be looking kind of where we are now, which there maybe not as much security. So I guess to answer your question, I don't know that what's really going to move the needle and impact the rankings and the selection. And again, I've always said this, Mark, the NCAA committee could make changes. They could, if we're talking basketball, you never know who the last four in, last four out might be. They've typically gone down by the ITA rankings. And being more objective. They don't have to. I think a few years ago they flipped somebody who had a direct win. I can't remember who exactly that was. So, but assuming they do, and we can kind of move up a little bit, well, I guess we'll be looking at the Big Ten teams we've beaten to maybe pull for them to do well. So we'll be paying very close attention, I think, to the Big Ten conference.
Awesome. And if it works out, having 4 teams from the Ivy on the men's side, to my understanding, would be a record. Well, we're hoping that that record happens and that your team, the Princeton Tigers, gets in there. Love to see you guys battling. And just, on behalf of me, Madison, the whole gang here at TennisONE, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to come out. And we're rooting for you. We're hoping that it all works out for the Princeton Tigers.
We really appreciate it, Mark. I appreciate everything you guys do for college tennis. And I've said this to many people. I don't know many others that know more about college tennis and where all the bodies are buried than you. You know all the cast of characters that are involved, and I appreciate everything you do.
Thanks so much, Billy. Best of luck to you and the team.
Thank you so much, Coach Pate. Right. Good luck.
Great to see you guys. Take care.
We'll talk about a better guest to have for our bubble show. So thanks so much to Coach Pate, and good luck to the Princeton Tigers. And we'll be watching on Monday. I know we'll be there. So now moving on, we just want to recap a little bit of some of the non-Power 5 conferences. Mark, do you just kind of want to run through and break down the matches that stood out for you?
The ones that Atlantic, well, there's 31 conferences, just to make sure everybody understands. And on the men's side, there are only 30 because the Missouri Valley Conference has a couple of teams that are shifting out into a couple others. They don't have actually a full conference on the men's side there. So it's 31 for women, 30 for guys. 18 full conferences were completed last weekend, and that still leaves 13 that are parts or whole to be done. But what actually has happened in the Atlantic Sun, Liberty on the men's side and Stetson on the women's side, and the Big East, shout out to my alma mater, Matt Brothers and DePaul University, upsetting St. John's and getting the berth on the men's side, and Xavier, Coach Dougie Matthews. His team has been dominating for a long time. On the Big South, Radford wins on the men's side, Charleston Southern, on the women's side. Colonial Athletic, UNC Wilmington gets it done. The women's are still waiting. Conference USA, Middle Tennessee, Jimmy Born-Damon and company, not going to host probably at 18, but getting it done. And Old Dominion on the women's side. And that was a big one because if Charlotte had won that, they would have been in, and Old Dominion with such a good ranking would have possibly taken another spot away from the bubble. Metro Atlantic, Monmouth over in New Jersey, and also that's on the men's side, and on the women's side, Quinnipiac. And the Mid-American, the MAC, Western Michigan on the men's side, the women is yet to be decided. Northeast, Farley Dickinson on the men's side, and Bryant on the women's side. On the Patriot League, Army on the women's side, men is yet to be decided. Southern, East Tennessee State on the men's side, Furman on the women. Southland, New Orleans on the men, Texas A&M Corpus Christi on the women. And the Summit League, Drake on the men's side, Denver on the women's side. Shout out to Paul Wardlaw, back at it, getting the job done, Mr. Directional himself. Sunbelt, Georgia State on the men's side, South Alabama on the women. And the SWAC, Alabama State on the men, Jackson State on the women. Western Athletic, Abilene Christian on the men, and New Mexico State on the women. And lastly, Missouri Valley Conference, no men's, but on the women's side, Illinois State Redbirds. So that gives you the last bit of everyone who's punched their ticket already, with more action to go. We're going into this weekend, and I think I think Billy summed it up quite well as he was talking about some of the calculus on this, but the teams that are just in on the men's side would be Tulsa at 44 and USF at 45, right above the cut line, with Arkansas and Charlotte just out without the ability to help themselves. And on the women's side, San Diego just in on the last spot. And San Diego has the ability to help themselves because they're playing in the West Coast Conference, and they still have Loyola Marymount was a top 25 team, and Pepperdine is a top 10 team still there. So San Diego could get that signature win and push themselves over and take themselves off the cut line. But right now they're still above it. And then obviously just out on the women's now, Wisconsin, because of what the results that happened in American and others. So Wisconsin's one out. SMU now, after losing, possibly not being able to help themselves, and Notre Dame now, who was in there, kind of pushed to 46. So Wisconsin, SMU, Notre Dame, sort of on the outside looking in. So the Big Ten, of all the conferences left, I'm actually going to be calling the Atlantic 10 down in Orlando. I'm looking forward to working with Maria Matias from Duke down there this coming weekend. But the Big Ten is the last place, sort of the big hurrah that everyone's watching. And I called the match last year where Illinois had a dramatic win over Ohio State, and that spun everything a whole bunch of different ways in terms of rankings, seedings, and the whole 9 yards. And I think ultimately the Big Ten, with it being last and being the strongest of a Power Five, always is going to have that eyes-on look. And maybe let's take a look at the Big Ten draws and make a couple comments about some of the upcoming matchups there.
Yeah, definitely. They start tomorrow, so we'll start things off with the men's side of the Big Ten. Mark, your thoughts on this bracket here?
I think that there's some big matches in there. I feel that Illinois, Wisconsin is obviously a big deal. Nebraska, Northwestern, some of these teams are obviously going to be in the situation where I think Illinois is the one right now in the Big Ten. Ohio State 10, Michigan, Ohio State 4, Michigan 7, Northwestern 29. They're all in. They're good. So right now, if Michigan could win it, they could solidify a top 8, Elite 8 hosting situation. And obviously, Northwestern at 29, they're just going to be, a number 2 seed going someplace. But Illinois at 54, they've made some great runs sometimes. Clearly, they've had some injuries and things. If Illinois were to maybe make a run and win 3 in a row and actually get 3 big wins over the teams there, they could actually try to make a case to squeak in at the bottom of the actual bubble and maybe knock a USF or Tulsa out. But Illinois would have to, in my opinion, win 3 matches, not just 2. But the women's side of the Big Ten draw, I think maybe gets even more interesting, where you have clearly Northwestern at 39, probably in good shape, but should probably beat Nebraska to get over the hump. Illinois women, who actually beat Northwestern here recently, if Illinois women at the bottom were able to get through in Iowa and beat a Wisconsin and then keep going against an Ohio State, so I think that they could try to make a run at 47. Maybe a couple wins could possibly do it. It's hard to say. I think you just got to keep going as far as you can go when you have the opportunity, and you can still help yourself. Ohio State women, I think, I'm not sure that anything can happen to help them get into the top 8. They just don't have enough volume of critical mass of possible wins in the league to get them over that top 8 hump. But Wisconsin is kind of the big bubble story, and we're going to have to see what ends up happening in this draw. If Illinois and Wisconsin play, it's probably the marquee match of the bubble analysis weekend.
Yeah, quite a lot to unpack. A lot of teams riding on this weekend, and we spoke to head coach of Princeton, and that them being one of them. So we're anxious to see how it all plays out, and that'll do it for our bubble coverage on here on the TennisONE app for Road to Champaign. We'll be back on Monday. Mark's going to break down the NCAA selection show immediately following that. So it'll be really interesting to see which bubble teams sneak on in. And we are so excited to break that down. So thank you everybody for joining us here tonight. And we're so excited to see you on Monday, immediately following the selection show on NCAA.com. So we'll be back here in TennisONE. Thank you all for joining us tonight.